August 1967, night patrol, Quang Nam Province. Dusk creeps in with a monsoon drizzle as a six-man team slips out from their firebase. They move single file into the tree line, faces blackened, rifles readied. The jungle at night is a different world. Every shape could hide an enemy. Every sound could be death. Rain begins to pour, soaking them to the bone. They dare not use ponchos, which would rustle or catch moonlight and give them away. Instead, they shiver in wet fatigues, crawling through mud and foliage. Darkness envelops the patrol. Cicadas whine, and unseen creatures stir in the undergrowth. Each man's heart pounds at the slightest crack of a twig. They halt, listening. The point man silently gestures. Did he see something? The squad drops to a knee, safety's off. In the distance, thunder rumbles. Over the patter of rain, the jungle's silence is absolute. Mosquitoes whine in their ears. A leech clings to one soldier's neck unnoticed. They wait in ambush, fingers on triggers, eyes straining for any movement ahead. American Marines and Vietnamese militia receive last-minute instructions before departing for a night ambush patrol in 1970. In such operations, soldiers moved into the jungle at dusk and waited silently in the dark for enemy movement. Every rustle in the brush set nerves on edge. Hours drag past midnight. The men fight exhaustion. A couple have gone 48 hours with little sleep. Water drips incessantly from the broad leaves above. In the pitch black, senses distort. One trooper swears he hears footsteps, but it's just the thump of his own heartbeat. Suddenly, a faint shuffle breaks the quiet. Real this time. A shape is moving on the trail. Adrenaline surges as they discern a silhouetted figure creeping forward. Click. The team leader squeezes his Claymore Mines clacker. In a split second, boom! The night erupts in a blast of light and shredding steel ball bearings. Screams echo through the trees. Instantly, the patrol opens fire, muzzles flashing. Tracer rounds streak red through blackness. An enemy ambush party has stumbled into their kill zone and is now caught in a lethal crossfire. One Viet Cong guerrilla, wounded and desperate, crawls for cover, but the Americans' M16s cut him down. Just as suddenly as it began, the firefight ends. The jungle falls silent again, except for ringing ears and the hammering of hearts. The men exchange hand squeezes in the dark. They survived. But the tremors in their hands reveal the truth. Every night out here tests the limits of their courage. I will admit it scares the hell out of me. One 19-year-old private writes home about these night ambushes. In the ghostly hours before dawn, the patrol inspects the blood-slick ground. Among splintered branches, they find the crumpled bodies of two enemy soldiers. In the feeble beam of a flashlight, one American sees a pair of eyes staring lifelessly from the mud, barely a teenager, clutching an AK-47. The sight turns his stomach. As the sun's first glow creeps over the canopy, the men slip back towards camp, soaked, shivering, and changed. In Vietnam, surviving the night is often the only victory. Ambush at twilight. May 18, 1967. Pleiku Highlands, near Cambodian border. Afternoon sunlight filters through dense triple canopy jungle. 30 U.S. Army troopers of B Company, 4th Battalion, 8th Infantry move warily along a narrow trail. Many are new in country, barely out of high school, eyes wide at the tangled green world around them. The mission is routine search and destroy, part of Operation Francis Marion. But the men can't shake an eerie feeling. The oppressive quiet, the way the jungle seems to watch them. Suddenly, a North Vietnamese Army, NVA soldier, steps onto the path in front of the point man. Contact front, comes the hissed warning. The NVA trooper bolts into the bush. Sensing a trap, the Americans hesitate. But orders come down. Chase him. One platoon breaks off to pursue the fleeting enemy. They push into the thicket, disappearing from sight of the main force. Moments later, all hell breaks loose. A cacophony of automatic gunfire and screaming erupts as that platoon is engulfed in a Viet Cong ambush. Hidden enemy machine guns and riflemen pour fire from all sides. Over the radio comes a frantic call. We're surrounded. B Company's other platoons rush toward the gunfire to help their brothers. They too come under withering fire from an enemy force far larger than anyone expected. Bullets snap and whistle through leaves. In minutes, the jungle is a chaotic frenzy of muzzle flashes, explosions, and the cries of wounded men. The separated platoon, about 30 Americans, is now completely encircled and taking devastating fire. A young lieutenant shouts for his men to fall back into a tight perimeter, but the NVA attackers are everywhere in the trees. By 4 p.m., radio calls from the platoon go frighteningly quiet. The acting company commander realizes with dread, we knew they weren't coming back. They were being annihilated. Inside the ambushed platoon's perimeter, U.S. soldiers fight for their lives. One sergeant, hit twice in the legs, drags himself from man to man, returning fire and shouting encouragement. The platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Bruce Grandstaff, refuses to yield. Bleeding from multiple wounds and with many of his men already dead or dying around him, Grandstaff orders artillery support dangerously close to their own position, the only hope to break the enemy wave. As the NVA press in, he grabs a radio. Fire on us. Right on top of us. The stunned artillery officer on the other end asks for confirmation. Are you sure? Yes. Put it on top of them, comes the reply. Moments later, whump, whump, whump. 155mm shells slam down, shaking the earth and shredding friend and foe alike in a desperate bid to halt the enemy. The thunder of American guns momentarily suppresses the onslaught. Amid the bombardment, Grandstaff heroically crawls forward and hurls grenades into an NVA machine gun nest, silencing it for good. But as he radios for one last barrage, an enemy rocket detonates nearby, mortally wounding him. His final act is calling artillery onto his own coordinates, a sacrifice that saves the few men still alive. When reinforcements finally reach the site the next morning, a scene of pure horror emerges. Scorched tree trunks and craters pockmark the jungle floor. Bodies lie everywhere, both American and NVA, many ripped apart by the shelling. The humid air is thick with the coppery stink of blood and the sweet sour odor of something rotting. Of the platoon's 30 men, only 8 survived the ambush. Those who lived through the night did so by playing dead among the corpses of their friends. As North Vietnamese soldiers swept the battleground after the fight, they had kicked the limp American bodies, shooting any that stirred. One survivor later recounted how he lay face down in the mud, holding his breath in terror as an enemy soldier prodded him, even placing a hand inside his shirt to feel for breathing. Miraculously, the GI stayed limp and silent, and the NVA moved on. He literally survived by pretending to be a corpse. Now, as dawn light falls on the clearing, other U.S. troops gather the stunned survivors and begin to stack the dead. A medic vomits at the sight of a buddy's body, riddled with bullets and stripped of his boots by the enemy. Hardened combat veterans weep openly. One young private, his face caked with dirt and tears, sits beside the body of his best friend and strokes the dead man's hair, muttering numbly, "We got overrun. They're all gone." The survivors themselves are ghostly pale, in shock that they are alive at all. At the end of the day, I was amazed I had survived this horrible battle, one soldier recalls. The ambush has earned a nickname among those who fought. The Lost Platoon. It will haunt their dreams for decades to come. Beneath the Earth. 1968, Cu Chi District, South Vietnam. Not all of Vietnam's terror comes under open skies. Some lurks underground, in the claustrophobic tunnels winding beneath the earth. Deep in Viet Cong territory, an American infantry unit has discovered a tunnel entrance, a tiny camouflaged trapdoor in the ground. A call goes out for a volunteer tunnel rat. Eventually, a wiry young specialist steps forward, stripping off his gear to the bare essentials. Just a flashlight, a knife, and a .38 revolver. He kneels at the hole. The opening is barely wider than his shoulders, leading straight down into dank darkness. He takes a last gulp of humid air, then lowers himself feet first into the unknown. The tunnel walls are earth and clay, the space so narrow he must crouch and shuffle forward alone. Down here it's nearly pitch black. Beads of sweat roll into his eyes as he grips the flashlight in one hand and pistol in the other. Click. He flicks off the flashlight. Better to sit in total darkness a moment and just listen. The silence is suffocating. He's acutely aware that somewhere in this warren, enemy fighters may be waiting or traps set, just for someone like him. These tunnels are a strategic nightmare for U.S. troops. Subterranean networks sometimes stretching for miles, often only 2 feet wide by 3 feet high. American bombs and artillery can't reach the enemy down here. It falls to men like this tunnel rat to go inside, one at a time, with only their wits and a gun. The Viet Cong have had years to prepare these dark mazes, and they have made them a hell beneath the jungle. Every few yards the tunnel rat pauses, heart thumping in his throat. The air is stifling and laced with the smell of damp earth, bat guano, and something else, rot. He crawls forward, feeling with his hands before him. It's deathly quiet, until a sudden scurrying sound freezes him. Rats? Snakes? Or a Viet Cong waiting around the next bend? He edges forward, knife first. In the beam of his flashlight, the walls glisten with moisture. Tiny spiders scuttle away. The tunnel bends sharply, forcing him to belly crawl through a tight choke point. His skin crawls with the thought of what might be inches away on the other side of the bend. As he drops down into a slightly lower section, his boot hits mud at the bottom. Thunk. In that instant, he hears movement. Whoosh. A section of earthen wall suddenly explodes open to his left. A sharpened bamboo spear lunges through the wall and straight through where his torso had been a second before. He only survives because he slipped in the mud. The spear tip grazes his shoulder, drawing blood. With a shout, he fires his revolver blindly into the dark void behind the now splintered wall. There's a groan, then silence. Shaking, the American realizes he narrowly avoided a classic tunnel trap, a false wall hiding an enemy who waits for the tunnel rat's feet to hit the ground, then impales him with a spear. Regaining his nerve, the soldier presses on, deeper still. But the dangers compound with each meter. He passes a discarded sandal, likely Viet Cong. The tunnel slopes downward, and the air becomes fouler, tinged with the unmistakable metallic smell of blood. He tries not to imagine what or who might be decomposing in some side tunnel. Without warning, something brushes against his face in the dark. He jerks back, smacking his head on the low ceiling, and clutches at his throat. He feels scaly, wriggling flesh. Snake. In panic, he rips it off and flings it aside, scrambling backward. The flashlight beam catches a glint of the creature, a venomous bamboo viper, jaws snapping. It had been tied by its tail to a bamboo tube in the wall, a live booby trap now triggered. The furious snake strikes at empty air as the tunnel rat presses himself against the dirt, heart hammering. He manages to slash the snake with his knife until it lies still. Gasping for breath, he realizes the Viet Cong had set up all kinds of gruesome surprises in these tunnels. Tripwires that unleash vipers or scorpions, hidden grenades, pungy stake pits, and drowning traps. It is a nightmare realm of traps and close-quarters combat. Gritting his teeth, the American inches forward once more, knowing that at any moment a Viet Cong fighter could pop up inches from his face. But this is what he signed up for. Search and destroy in the shadows. Rounding one final corner, he suddenly hears a shout in Vietnamese. A flashlight beam blinds him. An enemy soldier is right there, eyes wide in the glare, a pistol in hand. Both men fire at once. The tunnel flashes with gunfire and thunderous noise in the confined space. The tunnel rat feels a punch to his side. He's hit, but adrenaline surges. He lunges and grapples with the wounded Viet Cong in the darkness. They roll in the narrow passage, choking on dust and gun smoke. The American manages to draw his knife and, in a desperate primal fury, ends the life of his opponent in silence. When the support team later hauls the tunnel rat out of the earth, he emerges covered in clay and blood, trembling from head to toe. In his hand, he still grips a bloody knife. He survived the tunnel, but he'll never forget what it felt like in that underground tomb. I felt more fear than I've ever felt before or since, one real tunnel rat later confessed. The claustrophobia, the traps, the face-to-face fights in utter darkness. It was a special kind of horror few could endure. The tunnel rat gulps in the fresh air, blinking at the daylight. He is alive, but he has walked through a nightmare beneath the jungle floor. The Massacre. March 16th, 1968. Sun My Village, My Lai, Quang Province. Morning in the hamlet begins like any other. Farmers tending water buffalo, women lighting cooking fires, children chasing chickens in the road. Rumors of Viet Cong activity have put the area on edge, but the villagers here are mostly old men, women, and kids. Without warning, the quiet is shattered by the thump-thump of U.S. Army helicopters swooping low. 100 soldiers of Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry are deployed on an alleged search-and-destroy mission against Viet Cong fighters reported in the area. They land unopposed, no shots fired at them, no enemy to be seen. Nonetheless, the soldiers fan out with an aggressive fervor. Many are seeking revenge for recent casualties from booby traps in this region. What happens over the next 3 to 4 hours will become one of the darkest chapters of the war. The Americans encounter no armed resistance, yet an orgy of violence erupts. One squad comes across a bent old man at the edge of the village. A soldier, without a word, drives his bayonet into the old man's stomach. Another elderly villager is grabbed, shoved into a well, and a grenade is tossed in after him, the blast turning the well water red. Other GIs round up groups of unarmed villagers, prodding women and children forward with rifles. Despite pleading hands raised in surrender, the Americans show no mercy. Over 500 civilians, men, women, many holding infants, children, even babies, are systematically executed in cold blood. In one horrific scene, dozens of villagers are herded into an irrigation ditch. Mothers clutch their children, some praying, some screaming. The soldiers line up above the ditch, and on command, unleash bursts of M16 fire into the huddled mass. Rat-tat-tat-tat. The people in the ditch jerk and collapse as bullets rip through them. The firing doesn't stop until the trench is a writhing carpet of bodies. A few still moan in pain, but a GI calmly steps down and finishes them off with a pistol. An army photographer following the unit snaps pictures in shock, images later showing piles of dead women, kids, and babies, many shot point blank. Elsewhere in the hamlet, troops drag teenage girls out of huts, laughing cruelly. What begins with groping turns to outright rape. In a frenzy, multiple soldiers assault the village girls, then execute them with assault rifles once they're done. A mother is shot dead while trying to shield her daughter from being violated. Infants are torn from their mother's arms and tossed into burning huts. The village becomes a slaughter ground. Homes set ablaze, livestock shot for sport, and the screams of the dying echoing over the paddies, until, gradually, there is nothing but an awful silence. Up above, Army helicopter pilot Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson surveys the scene with mounting horror. He sees bodies littering the village and realizes American troops on the ground are massacring civilians. Thompson sets his chopper down between a group of surviving villagers and the rampaging GIs. Stepping out into the tense standoff, he orders his door gunner to train the helicopter's machine guns on his own countrymen, prepared to fire if the troops continue the killings. Facing the guns, the soldiers back off from the terrified Vietnamese. Thompson and his crew urgently ferry a handful of wounded civilians, including children, to safety aboard their helicopter. His brave intervention likely saved those few lives, but he could not stop the larger massacre. By midday, Charlie Company has practically wiped My Lai off the map. Some 504 unarmed civilians are dead, almost the entire population of the hamlet and its vicinity. Blood soaks into the muddy ground. The village well is choked with bodies. A small boy of about 10, Pham Thanh Kong, miraculously survives under a pile of corpses, his mother and siblings' bodies shielding him from the bullets. When he crawls out, dazed and covered in gore, he finds everything he knew destroyed. The Americans gather their own wounded. There were virtually none, as there had been no real enemy, and depart, leaving a few huts smoldering and an expanse of butchered humanity. In the aftermath, Army officers initially chalk it up as a military victory against Viet Cong. But the truth cannot stay buried. Months later, gruesome photographs and eyewitness reports reach the American press, and the My Lai massacre becomes infamous worldwide. The U.S. public recoils at the stomach-churning images and testimony. One soldier, racked with guilt, blows the whistle and describes how women and children were murdered in cold blood. Only one man, Lieutenant William Calley, the platoon leader who ordered much of the killing, is ever convicted. Found guilty of murdering 22 villagers. Even he serves only a token sentence, freed early in part due to public pressure. Many others who participated never face formal justice, but every soldier who was at My Lai must live forever with the burden of what they saw or did that day. It is a burden heavy enough to break the human mind. Some numb themselves with alcohol or drugs to keep the memories at bay. Others awake screaming in the night, hearing phantom echoes of those villagers' screams. My Lai stands as a grotesque testament that in the hell of Vietnam, the horror was not only what the enemy did, it was also what ordinary young Americans, pushed to the edge, were capable of doing to innocents. Aftermath. Haunted minds. When the guns finally fell silent and the Vietnam War ended, the horrors did not simply disappear. For those who survived, the war followed them home in invisible ways. Veterans carried searing memories of things no person should ever have to see. Decades later, a former infantryman sits up in bed drenched in sweat, heart racing from another nightmare. In his dream, he was back in the jungle ambush, reliving the moment his best friend was blown apart by a mortar. He can still smell the burning flesh and hear the rainforest buzzing with flies around the corpses the next morning. Sensations so vivid, it's as if he's there again. These men are haunted by flashbacks that strike without warning. A car backfire on an American street sounds like an AK-47 crack, and suddenly the veteran is on the ground, scrambling for cover. A waft of humid summer air or the smell of diesel can transport him instantly to a past firefight. As one veteran describes, there are very few days that go by that a sound or a smell, a sight, something won't throw you back into it. The war is never truly over for them. Some ghosts of Vietnam are deeply personal. Clifford Roundtree, one of the rare survivors of the Lost Platoon ambush in '67, later confessed, "I don't think there's too many days that go by that I don't think about them." The 22 friends he lost in a single day. He remembers lying among their bodies, playing dead, and is tormented by why he lived when so many didn't. This survivor's guilt gnaws at him daily. Many other vets carry similar scars on their conscience. Some are tortured by what they did as much as what they saw. Perhaps a door gunner recalls raking a fleeing figure with machine gun fire only to discover it was a child, not an enemy combatant. Or an ex-Marine from Charlie Company wakes up in a cold sweat, hearing the phantom cries of the Vietnamese women he and his unit once cornered in a ditch at My Lai. In quiet moments, these memories replay in their minds like an unending reel of horror. For countless veterans, the nights are the worst. In sleep, the buried traumas resurface as vivid nightmares. Wives learn to gently wake their husbands screaming in the dark, careful to stay out of arm's reach of a fist or grasping hands. One Army vet describes dreaming he's back in the jungle in that damn mud, and I can hear them calling me, the voices of his fallen comrades echoing from the tree line. Others dream of being overwhelmed by enemies or of the faces of people they killed staring at them. Upon waking, it often takes long minutes to remember they are safe in a bedroom and not back in that foxhole or tunnel. Some turn to whiskey or pills to keep the dreams away. But you can't bury something that deeply carved in your psyche. The war lives on inside them. Even decades later, a sudden loud noise can send a Vietnam vet diving to the floor. A waft of pungent jungle rot smell on a summer day might induce nausea and panic, a sensory flashback to decaying bodies in a faraway land. The psychological toll of extended combat in Vietnam was unlike anything the American public expected. Over 58,000 Americans died in the war, but many thousands more among the living left pieces of themselves behind in those jungles and rice paddies. They returned home with invisible wounds, post-traumatic stress disorder, a term not yet widely known in the 1960s, but a reality that would plague a generation. In 1971, an Army psychiatrist described veterans haunted by persistent re-experiencing of combat, what the world would come to know as PTSD. Veterans struggled with anger, depression, and feeling alienated from civilian life. How could they explain to anyone back home what they had been through? The sound of monsoon rain on a roof might send a vet into a dissociative trance, recalling nights huddled in the mud while mortars fell. Some vets could never escape the hypervigilance. In grocery stores, they'd find themselves scanning for snipers in the rafters, or they'd panic in crowded streets. Too many people who might be hiding a weapon. Families noticed their loved ones were changed men, quicker to startle, prone to heavy drinking or retreating emotionally, as if still lost in a far-off jungle. With time and support, some find a measure of peace. Survivors of the Lost Platoon, for instance, began having annual reunions. They gather by a riverside or at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, tracing the engraved names of fallen comrades and sharing stories. Through brotherhood and therapy, a few manage to slowly heal, though the scars never fully fade. One veteran of My Lai, racked with remorse, publicly apologized decades later, saying, "Not a day goes by that I don't feel regret and sorrow for what happened." For others, the weight proved too heavy. Many Vietnam vets took their own lives in the years after, unable to reconcile their experiences. In the end, the Vietnam War's horror cannot be measured only in bodies or battles. It endures in the minds of those who lived it. The jungles of Vietnam were scenes of almost unimaginable grimness, where soldiers fought an enemy often unseen, where a beautiful green landscape could turn in an instant into a charnel house of death, and where humanity's capacity for courage and cruelty were both on full display. These were not Hollywood nightmares or supernatural terrors, but real events witnessed and recounted by real people. The psychological and environmental horrors, endless nights waiting for an attack that could come at any moment, the shock of a comrade's sudden violent death, the sight of innocents slaughtered, the claustrophobic dread under the earth, the jungle itself teeming with peril, all of it left an indelible imprint. Years later, a veteran might be fishing on a calm lake at dusk when the sound of distant firecrackers transports him back in time. In his mind's eye, he sees the tree line light up with muzzle flashes, hears the urgent shouts of his platoon mates, and smells that wet tropical earth mixed with blood. He shuts his eyes, and it all comes flooding back. Vietnam was a war of countless personal horrors, a long journey into a heart of darkness that forever changed those who made it out alive. Their stories stand as a grim, poignant reminder of war's true face. As one vet put it, "Whoever said war is hell was absolutely right." And for many, that hell never really ended when they came home. It lives on in 30 minutes of nightmarish memories that replay over a lifetime, a horror narration with no end.